If we're going to be 100% honest, the sentiment the young lady shared with us is very common. I went through all her videos. Well, not all. I went through a lot of her videos, and I watched what she spoke about when she spoke about, potentially not having children, dating online, everything that she spoke of in the video that many of us are reviewing, about not having pretty privilege. And it's very interesting, right? Listening to a woman speak about these type of things and what she's reeling with, especially at the age of, 37. If from my understanding, she's probably going to be turning 38 sometime soon. And, I'm not trying to give her years, by the way. It's pretty telling. I think there's many people, specifically women, even more specifically black women, that find themselves in these positions. The young lady did say that she dated outside of her race. Go figure. And I think that's also very telling. One of the most common things that is told to black women is, why don't you try dating outside your race? Have you considered expanding your options? And as you can see, this young lady has, and similar results. I would love to know, she did say that she was pregnant once. I would love to know if that person who she had that what would have been her child with, if that was a black man or not. And just for my own curiosity. But yeah, this is very telling. Marriage is at a 150-year low in America. Millennials aren't having children. Millennials aren't buying homes so much. Millennials had less sex than Xers and baby boomers. Had less sexual partners than Xers and baby boomers. So this young lady, I think, is far more indicative of what's going on than many of us would like to give her credit for. Especially when it comes to black women. Upwardly mobile, college-educated black women. I think your average, and I don't mean average as insulting, your average black woman, I think, has way more in common with this young lady than we're willing to admit. And the young lady, from my understanding, also said something like, if I'm not mistaken, her first sexual partner was at 25 years old. I've said this before, and I think I've gotten a lot of pushback in this space, is that contrary to popular belief, way more millennials, and you're going to see this replicated in Gen Z, and it might even get, the number might actually increase, way more millennials, their first sexual encounters aren't in their teens or in their early 20s. That number is creeping up to mid 20s. I would not be surprised that in the next decade or so, if you had Generation Alpha coming of age and Generation Alpha having their first sexual experiences on average 25 and older, I would not be surprised. I'm not saying that will happen. I'm saying that I wouldn't be surprised. The social environment, the economic environment, the age of launch, it's changing. It's changing under our feet. Many millennials weren't able to move out of their parents' homes until their mid-20s. It's very difficult to be having sex in your parents' house, right? In your parents' basement. So I think this young lady just finds herself in a very interesting position. I also do agree with her on one thing. I do think it's just a big gamble. I think the romance in dating is a big gamble. And our current social and economic landscape makes that gamble more difficult for normal people that are not necessarily the best looking. They don't have the most money, they don't have the most status. They're just normal people attempting to make something of themselves and to go about life doing the best they can. but they're not necessarily trying to be a Fortune 500 CEO, right? People in that space, I think it's become a bit more difficult for them. And I think what this young lady is speaking to is that I would love to know how many other black women find themselves in her position, especially those that grew up in more diverse neighborhoods, more white neighborhoods. And so they have a difficulty maybe connecting with your normal average black person that might come from the hood. And then also, just because they grew up around non-blacks and maybe primarily white people doesn't mean that they automatically have an in those communities also. So they're kind of in a very interesting position, because and once again, I'm glad that this young lady said that. It's not a given, and I've said this on multiple platforms. It's not a given that, oh well, it's not working for me with black men, so I'll just go grab a white man off of a tree. Like, it doesn't work that way. And there's so many wannabe swirlers that speak that way. Like black men are the worst of the worst, and you know, you'll get turned down by them, or they won't be interested. But you know, a great white man or a great Asian man or a great Latino man, he'll find you interesting, even though black men don't, because you know, black men are the worst of the worst. So it's a given, especially if you're a brown skin or dark skinned black woman. It's a given that they won't like you, but a white man will. And that's not how the world works. Contrary to popular belief in the black community, you know, if you're supremely attractive, men of varying races and backgrounds will find you attractive and you will be sought after. And if you're normal, then you will have normal experiences. And if you're deemed unattractive, then it's not that you're deemed unattractive in the black community, but then white men are hop, jump, skipping over things to get to you. That's not how this works. And I'm glad that this young lady kind of she didn't say that exactly, but essentially, you know, we have to be honest. Like this dating landscape, especially for millennials, I would argue Gen Z is going to have a tougher go at it. And if we don't get it together in this society, Generation Alpha would really see some of the worst, most pernicious character traits from human beings coming from the opposite sex. That goes for men and for women. You know, this young lady gave us some of her experiences. I'm going to hope that what she told us was truthful, and she, like I said, I've watched multiple videos from her. I didn't just watch the one that many of us are reviewing and speaking of. And I would like to know more about what the end goal is for her and other black women in her position. Are they just going to resign themselves and, you know, I'm never getting married, I'm never having children, or maybe marriage is somewhat still on the table, but because they're, especially for some of the older millennials that are 40, 39, 38 years old, I'm specifically talking about the women, even more specifically black women, have they kind of resigned in themselves and said, you know what, marriage might be on the table still, but obviously I might have aged out of having children, healthily anyway. You know, I would love to know kind of what the end goal is, and what do they see their futures being like? You know, I think Generation X is going to be the first generation where you have so many people dying single and that didn't have children. I think millennials is going to get even tougher. Once again, the oldest millennial is 40 years old, right? And I think if we don't create a landscape that is good for child rearing, that Generation Z and then Generation Alpha will see this single rate just explode. We will have people that will be roommates with others well into their 30s and 40s, right? Usually when we think about roommates, you having a roommate of the same sex, we think of people that are in their maybe at the latest their late 20s, maybe, right? At the absolute latest, living with their parents, maybe until their late 20s. early 30s at the absolute latest. I think though, because of the landscape, that's going to continue. That age is going to continue to rise. The age of first marriages is going to continue to rise. That's for the people that do get married. And the age for first child birth is going to continue to rise, and that's for the people, once again, that do get married. This young lady is speaking to something that I think is way bigger than her, right? I'm happy she gave her story. I'm happy she spoke about pretty privilege in the way that she did. I'm glad to have a woman's perspective on this, and someone that, at least in my estimation, is being somewhat truthful and forthcoming. So y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments, and I'll end it right there.